Welcome to this week's episode of the Let's Talk Tenkara podcast, and thank you for joining. I'm Brendan Harden. This episode is going to be a little bit different than episodes we've done previously. The first thing that's going to be a little bit different for those of you tuning in on YouTube is there is video accompanying this episode. It is just an audio episode. The other thing that's different is this might be a little bit shorter of an episode. The reason being, today we are going to talk about the history of Tenkara fly fishing. Its origins in Japan, and when it came to the US. Now, Tenkara, when you look into it, there's a lot of different information on when Tenkara was created. You can look into some sources that will tell you it's prehistoric, meaning that it started before there was written histories. Other sources state that it's around 2,000 years old, and some of the more recent statements say that it was created as recent as 200 years ago. Myself, I believe that we're probably closer to 2,000 or more as far as how long it's been around. Now, Tenkara, when it was created, was a fixed line method of fishing, just like it is today, on a bamboo cane pole. Now, those cane poles were very flexible, much like Tenkara rods today, and modern cane rods as well. But for any of you that have used a cane rod versus a modern Tenkara rod, they are very stiff in comparison to a modern Tenkara rod. Now, when these rods were originally being used, the setup looked something like you had your bamboo cane pole, a horsehair line, and then they would use various baits or flies. Now, the flies, very similar to Kabari today, were just a simple thread body fly with a feather. They did, however, contrary to some people's belief, from what I've been able to find, use a Keiru style approach at the beginning, and that's where they were using bugs and, crickets, grasshoppers, flies, mosquitoes, whatever they could find that they could get their hook on, really, or get on their hook. And they would use these as ways to catch fish, obviously. Now, as we look into Tenkara, why was this a method that was used? Well, Tenkara fly fishing was created by commercial fishermen in Japan who were fishing on these high mountain streams, and they were looking for a fast and efficient way to catch fish without hauling in hundreds, well, maybe not hundreds, but without hauling in a ton of extra gear. They didn't want to have to pack around all this extra weight. That way, when they went to leave with their catch, they were able to carry more out. Now, for those of you that Tenkara fish, it doesn't get much quicker than having your rod collapse down fully. And remember, we're talking about a bamboo rod that broke down into maybe 4 pieces at this point. Generally, a one-piece rod would be more common, and a one-piece rod was probably pretty common as well. But when you look into it, with these collapsible rods that we have today, an experienced angler, when he gets to the water, can be fishing in less than a minute, having their rod completely set up. You can't get much faster. even hauling around a net that weighs a lot more, you're going to get into these areas, a casting net, right? You're going to get into this area, you're going to unwrap your net, make sure that everything's untangled. You're going to throw it out into this hole on this little stream once, and now we're going to pack up that net. We're going to walk to the next spot, and we're going to do it all over again. We're talking 5-10 minutes of just getting your net ready. Then once you get the fish in, getting the fish into your basket, packing that net back up, another 5 minutes to make sure that it's done right, to make sure that you can efficiently and waste as little time as possible as you're getting to the next hole getting ready to fish. Versus, like I said, an experienced Tenkara angler can be fishing in less than a minute with a rod that's set up ready to go. Now, it doesn't get much more quick. It doesn't get faster than that. And for those of you that have been doing this for a while, it doesn't get much more efficient. Now, the other upside is, if I'm going into these small streams with a net, I'm going to blow out a small stream and make it unfishable pretty quick. You're only going to get one throw in a hole. You're going to pull out however many fish you do, but then that stream is pretty much giving you all it's got for that section. Like, if with the way commercial fishing works, you're talking that in the matter of a few years, if it takes that long, a stream would be rendered completely empty of fish. Tenkara is a much more efficient way to yes, catch a lot of fish, but also keep a thriving population in that body of water. Now, that's not to say that you can't overfish a stream with Tenkara. You definitely can. And in my research, I found that there are several streams in Japan that's exactly what happened. You'll go to these bodies of water and there's just not fish there anymore because of that overfishing. But when it comes down to it, it's going to take a lot longer to overfish a stream with a Tenkara rod than a net. You're going to yield fish for a lot longer period of time. Now, as time progressed, technology progresses, obviously. We started getting bamboo rods that broke down into more pieces to where they're more compact. Like I said earlier, originally you probably started with a 1-piece bamboo rod, and later we got to a 2-piece, a 3-piece, 4-piece, 5-piece, 6-piece, until we got to these rods that break down into 10 pieces to where you're carrying around a 12-foot rod that's broke down into 12 pieces. Now, how do we make that more efficient? Is that an experienced angler with a 12-piece rod? Let me tell you, as an experienced fly fisherman, someone who fly fished Western fly fishing for over 15 years, it took me longer than 5 minutes to set up a 4-piece rod. We're talking, all these pieces that are being put together. Granted, unlike Western fly fishing, we don't have to worry about eyelets being lined up right. We don't have to line our line through the eyelets. We don't have to worry about the reel. There's a lot less to worry about, but it's still a lot longer process than if we just had what we have now. So how do we make it more efficient? We look at telescoping rods. There's actually evidence of telescoping bamboo Tenkara rods. So as time progresses, we keep developing these rods. In the late 1900s, we switch over to carbon fiber. It's lighter, it's stronger. It's just an all around better way to create these rods and be more efficient with them. So they just kept progressing to the point that we're at now. Modern Tenkara rods, we're using high quality carbon fiber. They're the lightest they've ever been, the strongest they've ever been. But we've got companies that are pushing it even further. We want sensitive rods that are still strong. There are straight fiberglass rods on the market now. Dragontail Tenkara has done an incredible, really, feat with combining carbon fiber and fiberglass segments of rods to make these rods that are absolutely insane when it comes to sensitivity. I've done reviews on some of their rods. Some of them, like I've said, I love their rods. Other rods, like the Foxfire, which was that first rod that had the fiberglass and carbon fiber combination, that rod just wasn't wasn't for me. Then we can look at more recently the Talon Mini. That's a phenomenal rod, and it really highlights how that blend can bring something new and incredible to the game. So now the question is, we've talked a little bit about these more modern rod designs, but when did Tenkara come to the United States? We know that it started in Japan, but how did it get here? Well, and really we've got to go back a little bit further to even predate when it came to the United States. Because as time progresses and technology progresses, obviously we have things like fly fishing. Western fly fishing makes its way around the world. People are starting to use that style of rod more. It's got a reel, it's got more line, it's got all these great features. Tenkara's a little bit more forgotten. Bass fishing becomes bigger. We get spinning rods, we get bait casters, we get free fall reels, we get all these different things. Tenkara is forgotten a little bit more. And really, in the 1900s in Japan, Tenkara wasn't a very widely known sport. Really until, I'd say, the late 1970s is when it really started to pick up and gain traction again. That's when you're going to see those changes coming over to carbon fiber, and those things start to happen as people start to rediscover Tenkara. They start to fall in love with the sport, and it starts to grow and take off. That brings us to more recent, 2008. A gentleman by the name of Daniel, I believe his last name, I apologize if I mispronounce this, is Gallardo. Daniel, in 2008, with his Japanese-American wife, took a trip to Japan. After having done some research online prior to his trip and learning about Tenkara, while he was there, he started looking around at tackle shops, and he ended up buying a rod. He brings that rod back to the United States, and it becomes clear to him that not only is this a simple way to fish, but he discovers the same things that these commercial Japanese fishermen discovered. It is extremely efficient, and it works really well on mountain streams in the United States, just like it does on mountain streams in Japan. Well, April of 2009, Daniel launches the first American Tenkara company, Tenkara USA. It is the first company outside of Japan to introduce Tenkara. And really, it's just been a steady growth since then. You look at just over the past, what is that? 14 years, Tenkara Tenkara has just skyrocketed from something that was practically unheard of to, you look online, there are people all over the place talking about Tenkara on Facebook groups. There's several different groups out there. You look through Instagram, there's hundreds of pages out there that are people fishing with Tenkara rods. You scroll through YouTube, there's more and more people posting videos with their Tenkara rods, trying it out for the first time, trying new rods. It just keeps growing. 3 years ago, I never ran into anyone with a Tenkara rod when I was out fishing. Last year, I ran into 3 different people. This year, I've ran into 4 different people. As you just keep getting further into it and it keeps growing, it's going to become more and more common. And I mean, in some of these Facebook groups, I see guys all the time posting about running into other guys on the water. There's a couple guys that it seems like every other week they're posting that they ran into someone else on the river while they were fishing with their Tenkara rod, someone else carrying their rod. My friend Peyton Skidmore, in his most recent YouTube video that was posted this last Wednesday, he talks about how right after he and I went, I don't know if he mentions it in the video or not, but he messaged me afterwards. Right after we had finished fishing, he went and fished just a little bit longer. And actually, now that I think about it, he definitely did not mention it in the episode, or in his most recent video. I did watch your video, Peyton. You're not pulling one over on me. And I still don't like listening to myself talk, so I probably won't willingly watch another one of your videos if I'm in it. But he messaged me afterwards and said, hey, I ran into Lance, who was out on the Middle Provo, or not Middle Provo, up a no-name canyon that I'm not going to say because that one's a Don't Tell 'em stream. Middle Provo is another one that Lance had recently asked about, though. Good section of river for anyone that's wondering. As long as you're into combat fishing. But Lance, shout out to you. I had the pleasure of taking Lance out on a trip a few weeks ago and had a phenomenal time. He really took to it, and it's been fun to watch him post as he's grown in Tenkara and really refined his skills with it. But it's just incredible to see how much it's grown over the past 14 years, and exciting to know that it's just going to keep growing. What does the future hold for Tenkara? Who knows? I see it as something that's going to continue to grow and pick up. It's going to continue to gain traction, and people are going to keep falling in love with it. Some people don't like Tenkara. We talk about all the time how we run into people that just, for whatever reason, Tenkara has a sour taste whenever they say it. They just, for whatever reason, it's not for them, and that's okay. I firmly believe that there is a right tool for the right situation. Ruben with Wasatch Tenkara will often say, have the right tool for the right job. He talks about how he's still got bass rods. In fact, this last year, they released a bait caster rod, a competition grade bass rod. It's one of those things where you have the right tool for the right job. And for those of us that like these small mountain streams, the Tenkara rod is just the right tool for the job. You don't have to worry about all this extra line to handle. You don't have to worry about, am I going to get my line caught in a tree 20 feet behind me? Still something you got to worry about, just not the one that's 20 feet around you. As you'll see if you check out Skitty Fishing's most recent video, I caught a few trees while we were out. Something that happens. But it's one of those things where it's part of fishing. You get out there, you have a good time. As far as getting back into history of Tenkara, like I said, in 2009, we had Tenkara USA. A little while after that, we had Tenkara Rodco, Dragontail Tenkara, Wasatch Tenkara, TFO, and many others that I don't remember their names. Many others I've probably never heard of. Now, as far as rods go, what's the best choice? I mean, obviously these rods originated in Japan. And, as much as we wish that we could say that all of these rods that are on the market today are from Japan, that's not something we can do. There are a few companies that pride themselves in having a couple models that are Japanese made rods. However, if you look into it, a lot of these companies that are in Japan selling rods, Japanese Tenkara rod companies, actually have their rods made in China. Most of the US companies are the same way. Like I said, there are a few that pride themselves in having a couple rods that they are a Japanese rod. But a good chunk of these rods are made in China. But really, it comes down to what works for you. I mentioned earlier that the first rods, they were a bamboo cane pole. If you want to use a bamboo cane pole, fantastic. Go to Walmart. They sell them for like $12. Have a great time with one. I actually have a video coming up, or an episode review. My next review video will have a review on a cane pole. I'm curious how it compares. That's the way you want to go. Fantastic. Get a rod. If you want to go the traditional Japanese route and fish a horsehair line, fantastic. Do what you're going to do. There's not a right or wrong way to do it. Rods these days, like I said, they're lighter weight and they're, for the most part, a lot stronger. When you get into your line selection, like I said, you could go horsehair. You could go with a furled line. You can go level line. There's so many different options. With level lines, you have anything from about a 1.5 level line. In fact, there might even be a size 1 that you could find out there. But I've seen size 6 level line as well. Depends on the rod and depends on the situation. Most of the time, I'm going to fish a 3.5 or a 4 level line. I like the 4 because it's got a little bit more weight to it and performs well in a windy situation. Now, if I'm in a very windy situation or I'm fishing a rod like the Phoenix Rising, I'm going to use a size 6. It's all going to be personal preference, though. I know some other people that when they fish those longer rods, they like to use a furled line. You can really set up your rod however you want, and that's one of the things that's beautiful about Tenkara is there's no one right way to do it. It's unique to every single person. I'm kind of rambling here and I apologize. But when it comes to the history of Tenkara, we just don't have a lot of information, like I said. Whether that means that it's prehistoric, like some sources say, and it started long before a written history was ever possible, or it's just something that the histories were lost, or maybe something that people felt irrelevant when they were writing the histories. Tenkara is not new. It has a long history, and it has equivalents of Tenkara around the world. Tenkara is not dapping. You're not just dapping your fly on the top of the water. While that is one technique you can use, there's a very large range that you can use of different casting techniques. A common misbelief is Tenkara is for small fish. As we talked with Aaron Kerr in a previous episode, he took a Tenkara rod to Alaska and caught salmon on it. There's this gentleman in Pennsylvania that caught a 40-inch tiger muskie. Or not tiger muskie, but tiger muskie is one that I'm hoping for this year. We'll find out. It's about having the right tool for the right job. Obviously, I'm not going to take a 5.5 rod out and target muskie or drum. But there are rods out there that are equipped to handle things like that. If you're looking for a simple way to get into fishing that you can learn the basics of very quickly, but can spend a lifetime mastering, give Tenkara a shot. Some similarities you'll see with Western fly fishing. You can get into nymphing. A lot of Euro nymphers, you'll actually see them working their way over to Tenkara rods. And part of that is just because they're using a rod with a long leader and they're tight lining it just like you do with Tenkara rods. You know, you're looking at fly patterns that you're going to try to put in the right drift just like you are with a Western rod. The difference between the Western rod and Tenkara, you're going to fish a lot more water with a Tenkara rod than you are a Western rod. And the biggest reason behind that, I've said it before, you can't reach as far. If I want to fish a hole that's 50 feet away from me, I'm going to fish my entire way to that hole. When I Western fly fish, if I wanted to fish a hole that was 50 feet away from me, I casted to the hole that was 50 feet away from me. And as soon as it was out of that hole, I casted it back into that hole that was 50 feet away from me. Tenkara has so much potential that is overlooked in the fishing world. And for those of us, like I said earlier, that are looking for a tool that's efficient in these small streams and a proven method to be able to have that efficiency in these small streams, look no further than Tenkara. Thank you for tuning in to this. I apologize that I was rambling quite a bit here, but Tenkara, it's a beautiful sport that while we know quite a bit about it, at the same time, we know very little about it. If you do have any questions, maybe there's something I didn't cover on this episode that you want to learn more about, or something that you'd like to share with me as far as information I didn't cover, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on Instagram at Let's Talk Tenkara, or shoot me an email at letstalktenkara@gmail.com. If you or someone you know would be a good fit for the show, please reach out. I look forward to hearing from you all. We do have some episodes with some guests that I'm pretty excited about in the works. But I look forward to having other people reach out as well, so we can line up a time and try to hit all 50 states for that 50 States of Tenkara series that we've got going. With that being said, thank you again for tuning in, and tune in next time. This has been the Let's Talk Tenkara podcasts, hosted by Brendan Harden. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Talk Tenkara. You can also shoot us an email at letstalktenkara@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out with any suggestions for future episodes. Or if you or someone you know would like to be featured on the show, or you think they'd be a good fit, shoot us a message and we'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in next time. And let's talk Tenkara, a Salt Lake Tenkara production.